I can see lots of people are coming in now. Just having a quick look in the chat. I can see Heather from Margate. Hello, Heather. Nice to have you with us this afternoon. Sophie, Stoke-on-Trent. Good to see you as well, Sophie. And I can just see, I think Donna from Newcastle came through then. Shashmita from NELFT. I'm not quite sure what that is. I think that might be Northeast London. Nice to have you on board. And Nate from Imperials just joined us as well. So that's fantastic. So we've got just less than a minute and we're about to go live shortly. So we'll be going live on the dot at 4 o'clock.
We're live on YouTube as well now, Ian, and we've got about 50 people joining us from there.
Wow, that's fantastic. So 50 people on YouTube also. So that probably means we're going to get numbers over 200, I suspect, by the time we are finished, everybody's on board. Right, so it's 4 o'clock. I'm now going to get this session underway. So welcome everyone to the first in our mini series of meetings on financial well-being that the NHS is running in partnership with the Money Advice Service. My name is Ian Baines. I will be your host, I guess, for today, and I'll be helping facilitate this session on your money, your hints and tips and tools for NHS staff. We've got a great lineup of speakers this afternoon who's full of advice and thoughts about how you can maximize your money. So without further ado, now we are going to be using the chat box today. So I would please ask that you perhaps try and find the chat box. We have two people in there who will be helping and supporting in the chat room. That's Lee from the Money Advice Service and also Louise from NHS England. They will both be in there working away, saying hello and putting links and various things in there. I'd really encourage you to lean in today and listen to the speakers. Be curious about what they're saying and maybe be curious with each other. Yeah. What are you hearing? What advice can you give people? What do you know? Yeah. Help each other through the next hour. It's a very, very important topic. I really encourage you to use the chat room. Before we start though, we're going to do a little bit of interaction. We would like to have some understanding in terms of where you are calling in from today. We're hoping for a good spread across the country. The way we're going to do this is we're going to use the annotation tool. So the way you find your annotation tool is if you go to the top of your screen, you will find annotate. Click on the annotate, yeah, and you'll probably find an arrow or something like that, and just perhaps put a squiggle or something in terms of where you are from. So I'm going to do it now. That's me. I've just put mine on. I'm in Leicestershire. I can see Bernadette's coming in London. Karen's also come around London. Kamal's up in the northeast. Donna's just appeared. James, Barbara, I see people coming in from the south coast as well. Also from over towards Shropshire. We've got people from all over the country joining us. I think that's fantastic. Just give you all another few seconds there. I think we've got an amazing coverage of people. We've got one or two people who seem to be straying out into the North Sea. That's absolutely fine. I'm sure that I'm sure you'll find your way back to shore shortly. But yeah, we've certainly got a lot of people. I can see people coming in Devon and Cornwall, all over the country. Then basically, so that's fantastic. If you're unable to use the annotation tool, just pop it into chat. If you're on the YouTube again, please do comment in YouTube in terms of where you're calling in from today. We really do want to make sure we've got a great coverage of people. So I'm going to stop the chat now and clear it all down and then move us on. So it takes quite a lot of planning, I guess, to put on a session like today. And I'm pleased to say that we have a number of people who are helping out and who have put today's session together. I'll shortly be handing over to Cheryl, who is the lead for these sessions presently. And then we'll be hearing from Caroline Clark. Caroline is the Chief Executive of the Royal Free in London, before we move on to our main contributors from the Money Advice Service. That's Nicholas, Caroline and Christy. Behind the scenes, I've already mentioned that Louise is in chat. She's joining chat as well at the moment with Lee. But we've also got Lindsay on YouTube and Zara behind the scenes helping out in terms of some of the technology. So that just gives you a sense of who the people today have helped put today's event on. I'm not going to run through this in a great amount of detail. As I said, we're going to hear from Caroline in a moment after Cheryl, and then we'll hear from Nicholas, who will talk to us a little bit around taking control of your money and budgeting. Before we move on then to Caroline, who will tell you a little bit about what are you actually entitled to in terms of money. And finally, we'll end with Christy in terms of where to seek help when money worries occur. And finally, Cheryl's going to do a little bit of signposting in terms of what is next. So we're just going to run, though, one little poll first, though, just to get a sense about how people are feeling about their financial situation. So when you think about your financial situation, how do you feel? Does it make you feel anxious? Do you strongly agree with that statement, or do you strongly disagree? Okay, so I'm starting to see that coming through now. And I can see that actually a lot of people are feeling quite anxious about their financial situation. And that's fine. That's part of the reason why we're looking to put these seminars on now. So over 41% of people agree that they feel anxious about their financial situation, and actually 13% strongly agree. So over half the people on the line today, do worry about their financial situation. Well, hopefully we can help you through that. So I'm going to stop the poll now, and I'm going to move us on. So I'm now going to hand over to Cheryl. Cheryl is currently the Deputy Director of Workforce and Transformation for the London region, and is our sponsor in terms of pulling together this mini series of events over the next few weeks. Cheryl.
Thank you, Ian. It's wonderful to see so many people actually joining today. I'm pleased to see that the message has got out far and wide. So a big hello to everyone, and welcome to the launch of the Financial Health and Wellbeing Offer for NHS staff. As most of you will know, and just looking at the poll there, it's clear that financial wellbeing is really important. And I guess as the NHS, we are really keen as an employer to actually do all that we can to try and better support our staff at this time. And that means considering you all as individuals and looking at you holistically. And that includes recognising the financial stressors that really take their toll sometimes on households as a whole, I guess. So we know that financial well-being is about a sense of security, feeling as though you have enough money to meet your needs. And at this point in time where the economy has been shrinking, people are losing their jobs, households are being impacted, and people's partners, family members, etc. are impacted. And it's for that reason that this is something that not only am I passionate about, but actually all of us as senior leaders are really keen to actually better support our staff as best we can. And being in control of your day-to-day finances and having the financial freedom to do the things that you want to do and make the choices and decisions that you want that enable you to enjoy life is really important. And you can't do that if you're actually at work worrying about where the next pound and penny is going. So we recognise as a large employer that we can better support our staff through financial education. And so I really wanted to take this opportunity to actually really capitalise on that and actually work with the Money and Pension Service to better support staff to make the decisions that are right for you and your families. Next slide, please. So in saying that, we've set the vision. So as one of the world's largest employers and the biggest in Europe, we want to make sure that we support you, as mentioned earlier, and reduce the burden of financial difficulties and the wider impact it has at home. So the National Financial Health and Wellbeing Offer aims to provide a range of resources through our partners for our people, their dependents, their families, so that they can make those informed choices and decisions whilst improving the mental health and well-being of our people. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we've done to date, we've actually set up a national helpline, which some of you may well have accessed. That is actually run by the Samaritans. And essentially that's identified a number of callers that have called with financial issues. We don't know entirely what all those issues are, but we know that financial stresses are definitely featuring in the top 5 reasons. So we have got some resources on the People website. So if you haven't looked at it, please look at people.nhs.uk. We've had over 6,000 views of that webpage, which is also culturally sensitive and takes into account how finance is viewed by different people within our diverse workforce. So take the time to have a look at it, especially if you are a line manager. It'll just give you a sense of how money is approached by different sections of the workforce. Next slide, please. So today, I just want everyone to be clear that what we're doing here is we're actually launching a financial wellbeing resource and offer that is available to all our NHS staff. So essentially, there will be a national telephone line that you can call in the event that you need help or support or some guidance around finance that's provided through the Money Advice Service. You can contact flexibly either through the national helpline or through WhatsApp, or we're intending to make a web chat facility available for staff so that you can choose to access at a time that's convenient for you. The second thing that we're also doing is actually launching a hub of resources, and that will be available on the People website. And the third thing is that we will be running this series of financial webinars or sort of interactive events. And so those interactive events will run every 2 weeks, and they'll be on different topics each time. So please do join us for future interactive events. Next page. So I'll hand over to Caroline Clark, the Group Chief Executive of the Royal Free and the current President of the Healthcare Financial Management Association. Over to you.
Thanks, Cheryl. And that sounds very unglamorous, doesn't it? But the HFMA actually is really important in terms of actually understanding how finances work across the economy. So I'm Caroline, I'm based in London. I'm currently in Barnet Hospital, which is part of the Royal Free London. I've got about 10,000 staff and about 1,000 volunteers, and their financial well-being really matters to me as a leader. And I think I speak for all people in my sort of position. This is really, really important for us to get right. And it may not be us individually, but we all know, we all have friends, we all have families who've been massively impacted by COVID, and we're all struggling with the level of uncertainty that we're currently operating in. So that's why I'm here. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes just kind of going through some of the numbers actually that Cheryl's been alluding to. So if we go to the next slide, Ian, please, and a bit on kind of why this is so important. So the Samaritans tell us that this is in the top 5 reasons of why people ring them. We know that they're complex. We know that our staff feel this is an issue for them, and we know that a poor financial situation can have a detrimental effect on people's mental health. And we know that our staff are not always feeling great at the moment, and we know that we've got a difficult winter ahead of us. This is such a big issue for the NHS as well as in society. We also know that that this affects people differentially, and we know that we have a very diverse group of people that work in the NHS. So we know that we're going to have to think about this in quite a focused way. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this is the slide that basically says 3 things. So you can see there 9.4 million workers were furloughed at the end of May. Well, obviously the furlough scheme ends, but there's more uncertainty. You can see that it's going to get worse. So you can see that bottom right-hand graph, basically things are getting worse. And then you can see on that left-hand graph, actually, that's just saying that this really impacted young people really, really badly. So we've got, you know, things are happening to different age groups, but it's really getting worse, and it's something that's happening in our society. Let's go to the next slide and say a little bit more about that. So we know that this is compromising households. So it may not be you individually listening to this call, but it may be your partner, your kids, or your parents, or it may be you because you're in a job that doesn't actually pay you enough to make your bills. So so this is a household issue. We know that where we have sickness, often financial stress makes that worse, and you can see there's some statistics here. And we know, as I've said already, that our workforce is differentially impacted, so it doesn't impact us all the same. And we also know that if we have more education and support, we can do something about it. So that's really what today is about. So let's go on to the next slide, Ian. So some of you may have filled in the People Pulse survey. So it's something that the NHS launched with the People Plan. And if you didn't, it's worth doing because it allows us to take the temperature across the NHS. So lots and lots of people fill these in. And we know from what people told us back in July that our people are very concerned about their financial well-being as well as health. But also that our concerns get better when we are better informed. So that's kind of an important message. Again, that's why we're doing this thing today. If you go to the right-hand side of that slide and you look down the bottom, when we say what support would make the biggest difference to help colleagues at work, and two things: greater clarity on travel, but also personal financial guidance, and that clarity on personal financial guidance available to employees is more people want that who are younger, more porters want that, and more Black or Black British colleagues want that. So again, this is part of this. We've got to be quite focused and nuanced in how we provide advice to people. People hear this stuff differently. They can implement things differently. So I think that's important. So this is where people want financial guidance. Let's go on to the next slide, Ian. And this is my final one before I hand back to you, Ian. So this is just, again, the results from that survey. So what you need to know is that BAME colleagues are experiencing higher levels of concern about financial and personal well-being, and they're also feeling less supported than colleagues who identified as white and are much less confident in their approach. So we need to do something about that. And I think that's really, really important lesson from that survey. So in summary, before I hand back to you, we need to provide more information to our staff. It needs to be targeted appropriately. And we think that that will help us make our organisations better to work in and to feel better supported. So thank you for listening to me. I hope you find the rest of this presentation useful. And Ian, over to you for a little survey.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you for just outlining some of those statistics, particularly around the sort of disproportionate impact that it has on different groups of staff and age ranges within our colleagues and communities. So before we go over to the Money Advice Service and Nicholas in particular, we just want to run another poll with you. And it's a question that I think might tease you a little bit. So, do you know how much you spend on your monthly household bills and outgoings? So things like your gas bill, your mobile phone bill, your rent, your mortgage. Do you know what your monthly outgoings are? So I think this is really interesting in terms of some of the results that are already coming through. Most people are actually seem to be pretty well informed. That's really good, actually. So 36% of people are definitely well understood. Yes, I do, around 30%, but we've still got probably 11% of people who aren't really sure, and a significant proportion of people in the middle who have just a rough idea.
And could we just invite those who can't use the poll for any reason or are viewing through YouTube to maybe put your responses into the chat so we can still get a flavour for those of you who haven't got a voice otherwise? Thank
you, Paul. That'd be really helpful, John. What we'll do is we'll also add your poll results in the chats to this one also, so we get a full overview. So it seems like there's a number of people who aren't really sure. So perhaps budgeting advice may be helpful to a number of people on this webinar today. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Paul to stop sharing those poll results. And I think we're going to now hand over to Nicholas Hill from the Money and Advice Service, who is going to talk to us a little bit on taking control of your money and finding ways to save, and before you borrow, what you need to know. Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Ian. If you go on to the next slide. In terms of taking control of your money, budgeting is key. Budgeting is basically spending less than you have coming in. So as my dad would say, cutting your cloth to suit your situation. But it's more than this, though. It's about helping you to spend money on the important things to you. It's about the peace of mind it gives you. It's helping you save for those unexpected bills. And the output can tell you if you need to take urgent action to reduce your outgoings or if you need to get further help. So in terms of when is it best to budget, well, it's very individual. If you've had a change of income or household costs, it's important to update your budget. Maybe it's a partner on furlough or a partner who's maybe made redundant due to COVID, or maybe you're going through a divorce, in which case, through some of these bigger life events, you might have to revisit your budget several times. In terms of how to go about doing a budget, some people like to use an app to track all their outgoings. Every time they spend, they update it. Some people write it down on a little notepad. And one person I know has a green folder and she puts all her receipts in there and gets it out to the end of the week. And some people even like a good old Excel spreadsheet, which is one of my favorites these days. Although I've gone through different stages where I've also done the budgeting where I knew that all my main bills were paid as soon as I got paid. And then I put the money I had free each week into my wallet. And once that was gone, it was gone. And that's my little budgeting trick. But if you've not done one recently, as per, I think it was about 10% of the audience by the sounds of it, you can use the free budget planner on the Money Advice Service website or look for one of the great apps online. An important point to note that if you're one of these people who is at the till worrying if they've got enough money to pay for the item, or you're having sleepless nights about money, these are early indicators your commitments have become unmanageable. If this applies to you, our free debt advice locator tool can get you in touch with free help, either online or by telephone. These people aren't going to judge and they will help you do a budget. And Christy will be covering this a bit later. And I know we've got lots of advanced level budgeters on the call, so this is a little bit for all of you guys. One of the things I do is list out all my upcoming costs in terms of replacing and repairing a boiler, a phone, a car, a roof. Take a boiler, for example, that can typically last 10 to 15 years. And you can actually get a rough estimate of that be and plan these upcoming spends which are required and see if there's any pinch points coming up. And this can really help you set a savings goal and reduce the unexpected from hitting you. Secondly, if you've got kids, doing a budget is a great opportunity to help teach them about their money and to set good habits early. Even if you're not very good at budgeting, they can learn from your mistakes as well. And we've got some great guides on our Money Advice Service website, which can help parents teach their children about money. So I've got a little three-year-old, and so I'll be making start on our first guide soon. But as you'd expect, I've already got a handling money and starting to get used to the concept. And lastly, if you've don't know what your credit score is, it's well worth going online to check it. There's three main free credit scoring agencies: MSE Credit Club, ClearScore, Credit Karma. Definitely want to have a look at least one. If you want to go to the super budgeting level, then potentially log into all three. It will give you an idea. It'll add up all your main credit commitments for you and help you spot possible scams on your account. Now, moving on to the next slide, in terms of finding ways to save money. We've got on the website a quick cash finder calculator. It's a very simple tool, but it just helps to give you a quick idea of an item you might be thinking of cutting back on and how much that could be worth, whether it be smoking, subscriptions, or takeaways. My personal favorite really is reviewing your household bills. Now, some of these are tougher than others to make some savings. With a typical saving, if you're on a standard variable rate, or it's around £200 to £300, and I know I'd rather have that money in my pocket than in the utility companies. Now, I was having dinner with a friend over the weekend, and they said they love doing this at the end of the year to see if they could get a bit better deal. But I'm sure there's lots of people who don't fancy doing it each year, or they're super busy juggling their lives. So it's worth being aware that Money Saving Expert just launched an automatic switching service, which means you can sign up to this and set your preferences. Maybe you want green energy, and at the end of the year, they're going to tell you that they're about to automatically switch you. And then they will switch you without you having to do anything. So I think it sounds a really interesting offer, so I'm looking forward to seeing that unfold. But if you're not planning to switch each year, well worth checking that out. Now, if you are renting, for example, if you're the one paying the utility bill, you would definitely be allowed to switch provider and save. But if your landlord is paying your utility bill, you can get in touch with him, see if there's any opportunity to switch, but he doesn't necessarily have to pass that saving on. So, but it's worth a conversation. Another one is broadband. Now, this one makes me quite nervous, particularly with my home working, about disturbing my broadband, but I always manage to get a little bit off. Each year, just before my contract's up, about a month before, I look up an alternative provider to see if I can find a cheaper deal elsewhere. Normally I can. I pick up my phone to the broadband provider and have a little haggle with them. And we've got more tips on our website about how to go about doing that. And I generally manage to get a bit of money off. But if you're on the BT Openreach network, there's a lot more switching options available. I'm on a Virgin network, so switching is a bit harder for me. Next, mobile contracts. For all those people who are potentially spending between 20 and 50 pounds on a mobile contract, and you're coming towards the end of the contract and you're happy with your phone, don't sit on it and keep paying for the phone and the contract, the network. You can flip to a SIM-only deal at the end of your contract. And typically, I was usually paying about £8 a month for 8 gigabytes of data, unlimited minutes and unlimited text. So that could be a huge saving if you've come to the end of your contract. But it's important to do your research, and there's some really good tools out there which will do a lot of the hard work for you. They'll even, if you give them permission, look at how much data you typically use. You can find all of those on the Money Advice Service website. And it's important to only pay for what you need, and some of those tools will help dig that out, because you can buy an unlimited plan, but if you only typically use 2 gigabytes, 4 gigabytes, you potentially can make a little bit of a saving there. Lastly, review those direct debits and standing orders. I'm sure we've all had different stages where we've been super busy and we've not quite got to grips with it, particularly during things like COVID, where maybe we haven't had a chance to use gym memberships, or maybe there's a subscription we never get around to reading. Have a look what you've got in your standing orders and direct debits online. It's fairly easy to do, or if necessary, go into branch and ask them to have a look at it. If there's any you don't recognize or you didn't use last month or the month before, contact them, check if there's any contractual terms you need to be aware of. But other than that, you'll be able to just cancel and save you some money straight away. Moving on to the next slide, in terms of borrowing. So this won't be a big surprise, but debt is a little bit like fire. Used right, it's a really useful tool, but used wrongly, you can get burned. So the analogy I always have in my head is if I'm reaching into an oven, I'm going to want some oven mitts on, because you've got to be careful. So I'm going to go through some of the things which protect me from borrowing. So borrowing comes in many different forms: credit cards, hire purchase, car loans, mortgages, student loans, borrowing from friends and family. And it can sometimes feel like a quick fix, particularly if you're getting towards the end of the month and you're running out of money. But here's some rules of thumb to help. Research does show that many of us are overly optimistic when it comes to repaying loans. So to help mitigate this, if you need to borrow, avoid, if you can, borrowing the maximum, whether that be for a mortgage or credit card. This can help give you some slack in the system and a little bit of peace of mind that you might be able to borrow a bit more if you really need it. Secondly, if you're starting to pay for food and utility bills or household bills by borrowing, it's one of the big indicators your commitments are spiraling out of control. Don't delay, get free debt advice today. You can go and use our debt advice locator tool, and you can get help both online and via phone. And also make sure you speak to your creditors, because many are being fantastic during COVID to help people out. Now, Thirdly, just because you can afford repayments doesn't mean the loan is the best option for you. We need to be wary of taking advice from anybody who's trying to sell us that product. They want us to borrow money largely because they're going to get to make some money out of it. So if I go into a car dealership, they might tell me that I can afford it, but they're not necessarily considering the running costs, maintaining it, the depreciation. And so it's important to plug in all these costs and work out whether it's truly affordable. What is the total cost? And can you afford it? And can you afford the risk you're taking on by committing to that contract? We have got a car cost calculator, which can do some of the legwork for you, helping you to work out the total cost. Now, one of my golden rules is to have a plan B. This could be in the form of insurance you can turn to if something happens. It might be savings that you can build up time if you can find a few pennies which can add up each month, or even just practical considerations such as moving in with family to reduce outgoings. Next, credit cards, or more aptly named debt cards. At worst, you need to always make the minimum payment, or you can lose any special details or get clobbered by additional charges. It's important that you try and pay more than the minimum payment. Otherwise, debt could take decades to pay off and cost you more than you realize. Now, if you've managed to get a 0% deal, always aim to clear the card in full by the end of the 0% period, or have a plan for that balance transfer. Otherwise, you could find yourself paying a much higher 18% or higher rate. If you're using a card for new borrowing, remember it's a debt, so never see it as an excuse to overspend. You must pay at least the minimum each month on the 0% card, otherwise you risk losing that 0% period, which means you're suddenly flipped onto a much higher rate. Personally, I've only ever used a 0% card when I know I put the savings elsewhere. The reason I'm using the card is because a credit card gives me additional protections with Section 75, and I know I'm now earning a little bit of interest in a bank account, and that's a very risk-averse approach. But if you do need to borrow, as some of us do, shop around for the best rate, as I'm sure many of you will. Having a good credit score is going to increase the chance that you're going to be able to access the best rates in the system. So if you've not already, go online and check out your credit score with M&T Credit Club or ClearScore. They'll even give you tips on how to improve your credit score. And if you need to access credit, they give you a certain percentage chance of being able to access that credit, which gives you much more peace of mind whether you're going to be able to access credit or not. Now, the NHS staff is in a lucky position in some senses because you have access to borrowing options the general public don't. It's worth considering these, but always shop around and don't assume it's going to be the best option for you. So you've got the NHS Credit Union. They offer a range of financial services such as loans and savings. They've currently got about 20,000 members. Next, you've got some NHS trusts offer salary advances. So this means your HR team can help give you your salary in advance if you're encountering a short-term problem. And it can be cheaper than borrowing money, but from other places, but it can be quite costly if you're going to start doing this on a regular basis. Lastly, if you know a family member or a friend who's encountering financial problems because of COVID, we've got the Money Navigator tool on the Money Advice Service website, and this will help them navigate the financial challenges of the impact that's happening to them. And lastly, I'll pass you on to my colleague Caroline, who is our resident benefit expert.
Hi everybody, and thanks very much, Nick. There's some really useful tips there. Good to talk to you today, and a lot to get through. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this slide is looking at the government support that you might be entitled to, and we're going to talk a little bit around universal credit and other benefits that are available to people who are working and might need some extra support to top up their income. So first of all, looking at child tax credits and working tax credits, and these might be benefits that you're familiar with already, benefits that you're already getting. But I wanted to explain a little bit about how these benefits kind of interact with universal credit, because these are two of the benefits that are actually being replaced by universal credit. So what does that actually mean? So if you are looking to make a new claim because you think you might qualify for support with child with bringing up your children, or because you're on a lower income, you now have to claim universal credit instead of child tax credits and working tax credits. If you're already on these benefits and you're wondering what's going to happen, well, actually nothing will happen at the moment as long as everything in your life stays the same. But if you experience a life event, what the DWP calls a major change in circumstances, then it's very possible that you may be asked to then move on to universal credit. And those life events include things like having a baby, losing your job, a partner or spouse moving in or out of the home, or even bereavement. And of course, those are events that are quite prevalent at the moment. So if you or someone in your family or friends are getting those benefits, it might be the time to claim universal credit. If nothing else changes in your life, you'll still carry on getting those tax credits, and then eventually DWP will invite you to move on to universal credit, but that's not a priority for them at the moment, and it'll be some time before that will happen. Next, I wanted to move on to support with rent and other housing support. You might really be familiar with housing benefits. And you may already be getting housing benefit. And again, this is one of those benefits that is being replaced by universal credit. If you have one of those changes of circumstance that I talked about, then you might be asked to claim universal credit. Most of the rules are the same. There's a slight difference in that if you do have to move on to universal credit, you'll get a payment for 2 weeks after your housing benefit has stopped, and that will support you in that 5-week wait for universal credit, because that's how long it takes to, after you've submitted your claim, to get your first payment. Now, if you're living in a high rent area or in an expensive area of the country, and your housing benefit or your universal credit payment, because that's what you'll claim now if you're making a new claim for housing support, if that doesn't meet your rent costs, then you may be able to get what's called a discretionary housing payment. And this is a payment that's paid by your local council or local authority, and it can help to top up your rent to meet that shortfall or to go towards it. So if you're claiming those benefits, or someone you know is claiming those benefits, other benefits like income support or employment and support allowance, job seekers allowance, it's well worth getting in touch with your council just to ask them if you're eligible. It's on a case-by-case basis, but it is there as support. Other thing to mention is obviously if you have one of a life event, something changes and your income reduces a lot, you might qualify for council tax reduction as well, and that's the same as if you become the single adult in a household, you'll be eligible for that reduction too. I very quickly wanted to mention support if you have to self-isolate, and this is so hot off the press that you can't actually claim it yet, but I do want to mention it because it appears to be a really important source of support for people who might have to self-isolate because of COVID. The government has announced it's going to pay a £500 grant, it's a single lump sum payment for people who have to self-isolate for those 2 weeks. It'll be available to people who are claiming the benefits that I talked about. You'll claim it via your local council, and that will be either online through their website or through a phone number. Now, it is so new that you can't actually claim it until the 12th of October. But the reason why I wanted to mention it was because you become eligible from this Monday, so from the 28th of September, anyone who does show signs of COVID can claim it. Now, to get it, you have to have been contacted by the track and trace system or have had a positive test for COVID. And if either of those things happen, you'll get a unique identifier, and that will be one way that you can prove that you might be eligible for the grant. You also have to prove evidence of your income, so that could be through your payslip or through if you're self-employed or someone you know is self-employed through accounts or your tax return. So it's something to look out for, and I would go to your local council's website. First applications can be made from the 12th of October, according to the information that we've got. We're not exactly sure how this works in conjunction with statutory sick pay or obviously contractual sick pay, and we don't have any details on that, but if we do, we will pass them on to you to let you know. We've kind of put that call out to DWP to get some clarification. Next thing that I really want to mention is the Citizens Advice Help to Claim service, which you might not have heard about. This is an amazing service run by Citizens Advice, who I'm sure you're all aware of. It's a free, confidential service that will help you make a successful claim for universal credit. The reason why we're so keen on it is because once you've made that claim for universal credit, and if you are claiming those legacy benefits like tax credits or housing benefits, they stop as soon as you make that claim. And if you find out that you're not eligible for universal credit, it can kind of leave you in limbo, really, because you've lost the benefits you did have and then you haven't got the universal credit. So Help to Claim can run through your eligibility for universal credit. You can do it through a quick phone call, you can do it via their web chat service. They do usually run a face-to-face service, but that's not running at the moment, and you can quickly find out if that's going to be the benefit for you. They can also help with all those other issues around claiming, because universal credit you claim online usually. An advisor can support you through that, help you with your paperwork, help you get ID if that's a problem, and also help you if you're uncomfortable around computers or you don't have access to the internet. So it's a really worthwhile service. We do have the details. I can give the phone number, or Lee can put it into the chat for you, and you should really take advantage of that if you can. Next thing I quickly want to mention, because this is a query that we get all the time, is how much will I get on benefits, either the legacy benefits or universal credit. So we recommend two benefit calculators. We recommend, it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's the Policy and Practice Benefit and Budgeting Calculator. It's a really useful calculator. You put in your income, you can find out whether you'd be better or worse off on universal credit, which is really helpful to think about how you'll manage your money, you know, once you've moved on to universal credit. It's really good as well because people get a nice surprise. For example, if you've got children, the childcare support that you can, or the help with childcare costs that you can get is more generous under universal credit. So you get 80% of costs reimbursed up to a certain limit, as opposed to 70% on tax credits. So people find that they are better off if they're working and need childcare. The other calculator that we do recommend as well is the Turn to Us calculator, and that's Turn number 2 Us. That's got a useful function on it at the moment because you can see what benefits you might be entitled to if you've got to self-isolate or you can't work because of COVID, or because you're caring, for example. And finally, two other really useful assets that I'd like to mention that can help you with universal credit. One is our Money Manager tool for people on universal credit. This helps you with all those just managing your money, both in the 5-week wait that you have for universal credit, and also once you're on universal credit, those longer term budgeting decisions. And it's really aimed at people who are on universal credit. So it's got lots of tips and hints for deals that you can get and things that you can do. There are certain grants and certain schemes that are available for reduced energy bills, for example, and we've got lots of information about that. And finally, we have a printed guide which is called Getting Ready for Universal Credit. And if you're on those benefits, the tax credits, housing benefit, income support, that may mean one day you do have to move on to universal credit, it's well worth either downloading a copy of our printed guide from our website, or you can ask for one to be sent to you. It's free and it gives you everything that you need to know about how you prepare to move across onto the benefits successfully. And that's me, and thank you very much. And I'd like to pass you on to my colleague, Christy McAleese, who's going to talk to you about Money Worries.
Thank you, Caroline. Hi, everybody. I'm Christy, Debt Strategy Manager at MAPS. can move on to the next slide, please, Ian. When I say to people that I work in programs to help people get debt advice and when they're in financial difficulty, people always say to me, oh, I know someone who needs that. They never ever say, oh, actually, I could do with that support myself. And that's because when we're affected by financial worries or debt, and we might try and ignore some of the signs that there are a problem, or we might feel that there's nothing that we can do about it. And there's lots of reasons why we feel this way. Some of it is because we're just optimists. We might hope and think things are going to get better. So we borrow a little money, or we put something on a credit card to help us get through the end of the month. And then next month we do the same thing because we live in hope that things are going to get better. Or we might be starting to get calls or letters or be missing payments. But we think it's better just to ignore them because we're really, really worried about what could happen if we have to acknowledge the situation. Or we might feel like we're on our own, having all of these problems is our fault, and that people will judge us. And that might even include our family or our friends. Or it might be just that the whole situation is overwhelming, that the letters have been piling up and you just don't know where to begin. It's very normal to feel like that. And if what I have said has rung a bell with you, then my message is very simple. It is time to do something about it. You're not alone. There is support available and that can help you find a way forward. So what can you do? You can take the first step and look for free quality debt advice using the MAPS Debt Advice Locator tool, which Nick mentioned earlier, and hopefully there'll be a link in the chat shortly. So why use the Locator tool rather than Google? Well, if you Google debt advice or help with money, you're going to see lots and lots of services offering you support. And some of what you read may sound too good to be true. And like many things that you read on the internet, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Now, I'm not saying that every service that you see on Google will be bad. But what I can say is that every organization you find using the Debt Advice Locator tool is free to use, and that MAPS has checked that they deliver the service to a certain standard. So it's really important that you use the tool. Using the tool, you can find advice that works for you. And that might be online, where you'll be guided step by step through a process that will help you get a clear sense of your situation and actions on what to do next. You can find telephone-based services as well, which means that you can speak to somebody in the comfort of your own home. If you need to find paperwork, it might be nearby, and they can work through, again, to understand your situation and find you some next steps. The tool will also help you find face-to-face debt advice services. Caroline mentioned Citizens Advice, and there are other services. Obviously, at the moment, many of those services aren't running, but they are offering different types of services. Some are offering video conferencing and various different things. So if it is important for you to see someone face to face, if you're really struggling with paperwork, and perhaps if English isn't your first language and you sort of struggle to follow a conversation on your telephone, do still check whether face-to-face advice is available, because those services have made real efforts to reach out and make sure that there is support there. So you might be a little bit curious about what will happen when you reach out for debt advice. So the advisor will ask you for information on who you think you owe money to and what your income is and what you spend money on. Now, they're obviously interested to know who you owe money to, so it might be helpful. I know those letters are scary. They may be piling up. You may have shoved them down the back of the sofa or in a drawer. But it is time to kind of take them out and have a look. And you don't need to deal with them necessarily, but it is very good to have all of the most recent letters that you've received available, because the debt advisor will need to know that. They don't want to know what you spend money on because they're nosy. They won't judge you, although they may ask you if you think there's certain areas that you could cut back on. But this is only to work out what your financial situation is and help them to understand what a suitable debt solution for you might be. They will then work with you to decide on the next steps. But it's really important to know that the choice is yours and you won't be forced to do anything. You won't have to sign anything there and then. You can take the information away yourself to consider what might work for you. It's really your choice, because we know a lot of people think that when they reach out for that help, they're going to somehow be railroaded through and not sort of, their feet aren't going to touch the ground. That is very much not the case. It's your choice, and the advisor will work with you to understand that. So it's a bit of a simple message. As I say, the best, if anything I've said either rings a bell for you or for a family member or friend, I do really encourage you to use the Debt Advice Locator tool, reach out, have that first step, have that conversation, start to get a bit of clarity on what's going on, and just really know that there is something that you can do about this. And that's me. Thank you very much. I can't remember.
That's fine, Kirsty. That's okay. I'll take over. That's not a problem at all. So I think we had quite a lot across our three speakers there. Some hints and tips with regards to, checking your credit rating, using money saving experts. How many of us when was the last time we changed our broadband and thought about our mobile bills? We also heard some advice from Caroline. Some of that advice was completely hot off the press around benefits, around support to self-isolate. And finally, from Kirsty, around debt advice and about making sure that, if debt is a worry to you, that you seek help, and that help will be there and will be confidential through the Money Advice Service. So I think we've got a little bit of time actually, which is good. I was slightly worried we wouldn't get any time. So I'd love now, and I'm going to put YouTube and the chat box on 10 seconds notice, I guess, that I'm going to come to Louise first and then Lindsay over in YouTube. I just want to get a sense from you, Louise, in terms of, what are people saying in the chat room? And is there a particular question that maybe somebody wants to put to one of our three panelists today? So Louise.
Thanks, Ian. Yes, there's a lot of activity going on in the chat box this afternoon. So thank you so much, everybody, for sharing your tips, your thoughts, your advice. Lots of swapping of tips around discounts available, and other different ways of saving, and lots of links in chat, which we'll try and extract and make sure are available to people after the session today. So thank you, everybody, for all of your input. Couple of questions. Well, there are some particular questions that have come up, and I think, Nick, you covered it over earlier a little bit, but if you could have a recap, please, on any top tips for best budgeting apps, I think that would be definitely appreciated. And if I can squeeze in another one, there was a question from Lauren about would you recommend getting a credit card to build your credit score in order to show that you can make repayments? I'll leave it there. I've got more if you don't want them.
Nick, I think the first one was for you around best budget apps.
Yeah, there's a few out there in the market available. So the simplest way to access them is to go into your relevant app, whether you're with Apple or Google, and have a little search and see which ones pop up first. It's often best just to have a little nosy into each one to see what you're going to roughly get. But if you're not too sure where to start, the simplest way is just to go to our budget planner, which we've got on our website. And that's going to give you a really good snapshot of your finances. It's really detailed. It'll help inspire you to think about all the different aspects which you might need to consider.
That's fantastic. And the second question was around the credit card and whether it's right to use a credit card to perhaps get a credit rating. Is there anybody who could answer that one for us?
Kirsty, shall I take this, or do you want to?
I can chip in. You go first, and then maybe we'll.
Credit card builders can be tricky because they potentially can be costly. So you have to be careful with them. Before I went to a credit card builder, I would first make sure you've accessed your free credit report online. Go through all the things which they suggest you can do to build your credit score, make sure it's as good as possible. We've got a really good page on the Money Advice Service website, which will take you through step by step a long list of things which you can do in terms of registering the right to vote, and a whole host of other ones. and that will help you boost your score. If you've got a really bad score because some things have gone in your life, which means that you've not been able to look after managing your bills, then it can take quite a bit of time and effort to build up that credit score with time. So some patience is needed, but I would start by making sure you've accessed, say, free credit reports such as Money Saving Expert, and it's going to give you lots of tips, and it's even going to point out where you can start to improve your credit score and where you're weaker.
Christy, do you want to add to that? So
Nick stole my top tip, which is electoral register, because people don't know that, but that is the one. If you're on the electoral roll, it improves your credit score and you get to vote. So yeah, it's win-win.
Can I just add one more? For those super budgeters, if you've not checked your credit score, I started to get into it because the free credit scores have only really been around in the last few years. As soon as this happened, I checked mine, and there was just some error in my credit report. There was just a slight mistype of my address, and by getting that fixed, I saw within a couple of months a big boost to my credit score. So it can be as simple as that to boost your score.
thank you, Nick. So some good advice there around getting on that electoral register. I'm just going to see if my colleague Lindsay has got any particular comment to make from YouTube, because we've got quite a lot of people over in YouTube, as I understand it. Lindsay, any comments over there?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. We have got quite a few people joining us over on YouTube. Lots of people really interested in budgeting and sharing their ways in which they're budgeting their money each month, and obviously lots of interaction with the polls. Just a couple of questions. We've got one from Sarah, specifically around the benefit checkers and whether they're useful for those who aren't already in receipt of any benefits. And another question from Siobhan around higher utility bills, given the fact that there are lots of people now working from home, and whether there are any suppliers taking that into consideration.
Caroline, are you able to start with the benefit check?
Yes, sure. I can you hear me okay? Because I
can't.
Loud
and clear, Caroline.
So I could see myself before. Yes, absolutely. And I should have made that clear that if you're looking to make a new claim, those benefit checkers are really, really good for that as well. So I do recommend using them. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Lindsay, just remind us again of your second question.
Yeah, it was utility bills and people working from home, and whether there are any suppliers taking that into consideration.
Any thoughts around that, Nick or Christy, around people working from home and utility bills?
So people might have experienced their utility bills going up. So it's important to review that your monthly payment is still going to be enough, that you're not building up some kind of debt in the background. At the beginning of COVID, I increased my monthly payments on the basis that my monthly bills are going to go up. So that's a little budgeting trick during COVID. Ultimately, if you're using the service, it needs to be paid for. But if you've not switched in the past year, or you're on a standard variable rate, then switching really could save you £200 or £300, which could make a big difference and could take a big chunk of any increase in bills. There's also some great tips about making the home more energy efficient, and the government's launched a new home energy efficient Green Homes grant, which you can try and make use of to make your home more efficient and reduce those bills further. But if you are in very difficult financial circumstances, the utility companies are trying to work with customers to try and make sure that they get help to make those payments and are sympathetic to the impact of COVID.
Thank you, Nick. And I think we're getting towards the top of the hour now. I'd love to have had a little bit more time for a few more questions from the chat. But thank you to both Nick, Christy, and Caroline for answering those questions, and Caroline Clark at the beginning also. So I'm going to move us on now. We're getting towards the top of the hour, and we're getting in the final 2 or 3 minutes now. So I'm just going to hand over now a little bit to Cheryl. I'm going to ask Cheryl in terms of perhaps just closing the session for us and perhaps telling us a little bit around what's coming next. So Cheryl, are you able to close the session for us, please?
Thanks ever so much, Ian. So just want to say a really big thank you to all the presenters, but also for all the staff and colleagues that have actually joined the session today. This is probably the first step for some people, actually choosing to actually come and find out a bit more and having the opportunity to just understand what they could do differently in sometimes what has been very challenging circumstances for people. So having noted all of that, I guess the key thing probably to take away from this is some of the hints and tips and tools. Don't forget that we've just launched the website, which is available for everyone to look at. And you can use some of the articles there just to understand things similar
because I come back quite late now,
that are similar to your circumstance. And then you can also look at any tools that might help you to make some different decisions that impact your family and your circumstances more positively. So just to say, in terms of what's coming next, the next session that we're having is called Hidden Figures, and that's talking about money in difficult circumstances. So you'll know that there are lots of things that have been impacting more recently, but there are some financial issues that are just that bit more difficult to talk about than others. And so we've had lots of bereavements, we've had increased use of gambling in some instances during COVID, online gambling. We've also had people struggling with their mental health, but also people that have also had to deal with bereavements as well. So, and some of those bereavements have been unexpected, and that clearly is an additional financial pressure that has hit families in a way that they wouldn't have expected prior to COVID. So on the 15th of October, we'd love to see you all back here. Please spread the word, tell friends, family, staff and colleagues that are all in the NHS and the wider NHS family. This is our opportunity to actually really educate, help and inform others to make best choices that actually impact them and their wider families. So thanks everybody for coming along today. It's been lovely to see you all. Look forward to seeing you on the 15th of October at 4 o'clock till 5. So thank you ever so much. And thanks for all the chat too.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I guess it just says for me to say thank you to everybody for participating this afternoon. And that concludes our meeting this afternoon. So goodbye. If you want to put a little bit in the chat in terms of what you thought of the session, all feedback will be taken into future meetings. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.